Hello, everybody. This is Eric, and I'm back again doing a live stream tonight. It was rather impulsive for me to do because I've been doing a lot of videos and gives me the freedom. But I was doing them through COVID. We called it the COVID Comfort Hour, Tuesday Night Comfort. And I was inspired by one of our viewers. So I thought, hey, let's just catch up here. I've been busy with therapy a lot. I'm a professional therapist, and I hear just people calling every day with hardships. And I'm not saying this as a complaint, I'm just saying this. Hello, Erin, Justina, Mary McDonald. Welcome to have you. I was inspired by two people today. Um, but I'm hearing really, really hard stuff like people afflicted with cancer and like three cancers and losing body parts that are necessary and trying to find some kind of peace or joy in that. Part of it is I have a waiting list, so I can't actually help the people that are on a waiting list. So it's inspired me to try to put more out there in video. I think groups are where it's at. I think that good books could help people, good videos. Tonight, we're going to talk about an attitude of gratitude. And I'm just going to jump right in. Attitude is it's really important, really, really important. Um, and I'm going to start by sharing a quote from a Charles Swindoll. He's an evangelical pastor. And I've never found anything close to this. I'm needing to find it as I threw this together. I'm just going to read that. So here is what I'm going to read, and I'll post the link for it. Attitude. The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures, than successes, than what others think or do or think or say or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is that we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change the past. We cannot change the fact that people will act in a certain way. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is to play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to be and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. I think that's really powerful. I've never really ran into something so powerful to describe attitude. We could also describe attitude as being in a good mood. Looking up the origins of the word attitude, it actually stems from a posture. In sculptures, they would describe the posture of the figure that was depicted as this attitude or that attitude. And there is a sense that the posture we take in life is really important. If I see the world, and lately, I will talk about that, how we see the world, it's going to change how we are. It's going to change even our physiology. If I see the world as a miserable, bad place, that people are really evil, and there's greed, and bear with me on this, there's greed, there's people abusing people, murdering people, power hungry people, deceptive people, just a bunch of bad people doing a lot of bad things. that's going to get me in a certain mood. And here we are on YouTube. God bless YouTube, but YouTube or other media outlets that could cause us to go, well, I need to watch more of how bad the world is, so I'm just going to click here. And it tempts us. It's almost, I heard someone this morning say it's almost addictive, that I need to see how bad something is, see how this country is falling apart, seeing how this is happening and all that. And I'm not trying to belittle pain and suffering, but there's something belittling about the experience of me watching it on, what we'll say, a TV set. How is that helping anything? How is it helping my brain? How is it helping them? And so that's something to consider, is to step back, to ask ourselves, how is this helping? And how many of us have we asked that question? If it's not helping, then why do we do it? It could be that there is a strange addiction to it, that watching something worse than ourselves, we find ourselves then feeling better than them. Or maybe we are neurologically built towards fear and catastrophe. And we got to run and see the burning building, say like in a town where there was a burning building, or even worse things. People got to go run to see it, versus I'll just go home and pray about it, and which would be more valuable. We might lend a helping hand if we're running to help. So, and I know in my family, and I don't want to divulge too much, and I'm talking about my family growing up, we had people that really ran towards the negativity, well, can I share this with it? I think I can share this. There were grandparents that would actually just call my mom and read the paper how bad things were. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? And we're talking the 60s and 70s. There was bad things happening then. My mother, being who she is, and it seems to have helped her to go real positive, says, I don't need to hear about that. She just wouldn't listen to it. And she went maybe to another extreme. I'm not sure if it's totally an extreme, but she just didn't want to hear about anything negative. So I can identify with both. I think there is a time to be upset, a time to be joyful, a time for sadness and sorrow, and a time for gratitude. So this isn't really about getting rid of one or the other. I think life has it all. The cup is half empty. I had a cup here, but a cup is half empty and half full. And it's actually both. That's how things are. I think what we're talking about is dwelling on something, living in that state. There is a story of a man, well, there's lots of people in wheelchairs. And this person comes up and was, I guess, bold enough to just say, hey, it must be difficult, your life in a wheelchair. Maybe it's constraining you. And the guy says, are you kidding? No, actually, this wheelchair is helping me get around. It provides freedom. If I didn't have this, my disability would land me in a bed and I would be able to get out of it. So it shows you it's all about perspective and all about what we dwell on. And there are Christian saintly people who talk about this. There is a gentleman, if you look him up online, and we'll put links there. His name's Paisios. In fact, I'll put this in the Saint Paisios. He talks, if there was a patron saint for positive thinking, it would be him. Shared two stories, and they are Christian references, but those that are Christians could identify. But I think even people not of any particular faith would benefit from this. let's go the more spiritual thing first. He says that when Christ is on the cross, there's two thieves on either side of him. Most people understand that there's three being crucified. The Son of God is in the middle. The thief on his left is totally putting him down. Even while he's being crucified in pain and suffering, this thief has the energy to say, hey, if you are the Christ, why don't you get us all down here? Mocking him, you can't even save yourself. But the other thief, even though he's in pain and suffering, and he's dying as a thief, he sees the good in Christ. He sees that this is the Son of God. In fact, so much so that just a simple sentence saves him. The sentence is, could you remember me in your kingdom? And Jesus replies to him, today you'll be with me in paradise. I think what it must be like to have been that thief. This was the worst day of his life, but maybe the best day of his life, but also the last day of his life, at least on earth. In fact, we, in my faith tradition at church, have an icon of all saints. This commemorates all the saints of the church, whether they were known or unknown. And I remember we were talking one day, and there's all these little saints. There's a little guy carrying a cross. That's the thief who was next to him. So St. Paisius says, look, these two thieves kind of represent all of humanity. He says that our brains are like factories, manufacturing thoughts. One thief is constantly thinking about negative, fault finding, critical. The thief on the right is thinking positive. And it's like, whoa, I never thought of that this is really kind of like an archetype for us. Either I'm going to be thinking positive or I'm going to be thinking negative. And if I think negative all the time, my glasses are dimmed, I just can see only the negative. I'm not going to see the positive. I'll be blind. I won't see the handiwork of God. I won't see God in difficult situations. I will just see the negative in everything around me. But I can choose with my attitude to force myself. I think we have to ask God for help, but to force myself to look at things differently. If we wanted to take micro steps here, let's just look at things differently. And in fact, I'm going to get ready for us a document from the AA book, which I'll find useful later to share. That we just need to take a step to say, maybe I'm not seeing things clearly. Maybe I've been afflicted by watching too many negative things in the world. And the tricky thing is they seem more negative than they were. So I've just got to be in the know. But I can train myself to go, I just don't need to see this right now. Or if I've got to be in the know of how negative something is, I will do it in moderation. In fact, if we're prone to depression and anxiety, and if we're prone to anxiety and depression, I would do it even less. Just say, I don't need to see anything more. My nervous system can't take it. So that's the one metaphor. The next metaphor is St. Paisius said, be the bee. Be the bee relates to this idea that we can be a fly or we can be a bee. The fly, he puts in a delicate way, lands on dirt. I think it's cute as he says it that way. He doesn't want to offend anybody, but it lands on dirt, and we can only imagine worse stuff that flies land on. And they honestly don't look for flowers. I don't think I see flowers or flies on flowers. Now, a bee, on the other hand, looks for flowers, totally ignores all the dirt out there, looks for brightly colored flowers that are beautiful to get the pollen. And with that, we end up having food as a result of this. So if we're a bee, we're going to look for what's good. If we're a fly, we're going to look for the bad. And that's kind of the choice we have. So continuing on with our discussion here, I'm thinking I might share the screen here. As some of you might have been following us with the AA book. For those in recovery, it can be really useful. I'm going to take away that screen while I zip down to the right area so that you guys don't get dizzy. There is a section in the book where it talks about people that we're angry at, resentful towards. They say with any addiction, that is the heart of it, that our resentments block God's power, and we need power in order to survive, to be happy, to be at peace. And to be at peace, how are we going to do that if we find and see that there's such badness and such fault in the world? Well, we're going to do it by how they suggest we do it. And I was just thinking this the other day. There's not many other ways to fight this. Sorry, it's taking me a little bit longer. Thank you for waiting. Okay, this is a good place to. This would be on page. I would recommend getting an AA book, even if you don't even think you have an addiction, because it's just so useful. Page 64. It said resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics or any other holic, a sexaholic, compulsive gambler, compulsive overeater, compulsive fixer, compulsive workaholic, drug addict, etc. It is the number one offender. It destroys more, we'll say, people than anything else. From it stems all form of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with the resentments, we set them on paper. Okay, so, and I'll do a special video on step 4. But so we write our resentments on paper. There's something very valuable to just admit that I'm mad at the government, the governor, the people that are trying to force agendas, either way, politicians. I'll go to town here, media people who think they're helping. I don't think they're helping. I think they're just trying to make a lot of money, preying upon our fears and resentments. That's what I think. I'm pretending to kind of get resentful here. I could be mad about childhood. I could be mad about the school system. Oh, there's a good one. Now I have dear people in my life who are school teachers. But if I get inebriated with what their agenda is forcing down. It can get really negative. And if I shared any of what I've learned in the last 2 weeks, you would be probably just jumping out of your skin. I think the average person doesn't realize. Let's see what else. Well, wars. And we know of the Ukrainian and Russia war, but there's also a war in Ethiopia that's horrific. It's worse. But we don't hear about that. Why? Because the media picks and chooses what we get. So see the resentment, I could be mad about that. I could be resentful of illness in my life, resentful towards a boss, towards work, towards aches and pains in one's body. Gas prices, not having any money. Let's try to capture everything. Oh, how about resentments towards something where someone has really done something horrible to you and you just can't get over it. So the word resent comes from the root to re-feel, sentir. So sentir means to feel. In Latin or French or Spanish. To resent means to re-feel it over and over and over and over. It's kind of like a negative meditation. The first time they hurt me, the next zillion times I'm just hurting myself, holding on to it. Okay. So how are we going to be free? Well, they give a solution here, which is very interesting. We write them on paper, and we're going to skip this part. So we were sore, we were burned up. Yep, that's true. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. How many of us believe that? The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. It's almost as if we could become a victim, like a resentment magnet of how bad the world is. And maybe we don't feel so victimized as we're so saddened by what's happening to other people. That's kind of my story. I get so upset by what's happened to other people that I can get kind of inebriated with resentment. And I guess we could say mad and angry at what happened to my clients. And I don't even know their brother-in-law or with their parents. So we'll talk about that. It says the usual outcome, to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. How many of us have had that? We've done something we feel so bad about, we just can't get over it. We are just that embarrassed, humiliated, ashamed. We can't forgive ourselves. We re-feel over and over and over and over what we did wrong. And most of it is because we were human and were afflicted with, we'll say a disease. And this is almost giving away some of the solution here. We'll quickly get to the solution so that you'll see where I'm coming from. To conclude that others were wrong as far as most of us ever got, the usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentments leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, or think about them, or watch them on YouTube, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? But with the alcoholic or addict or codependent whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. For when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. So that's another way to say we're blocking God Himself. We are stiff-arming God and say, I can't deal with this. We could be mad at Him. You created this crazy world. Why are you letting all this pain and suffering? Well, come to think about it, there's pain and suffering from the beginning of the world, so nothing's new. But I have a better plan. This should involve no pain and suffering. Or why did you let this happen with these people? If I won't forgive someone, I'm blocking God's power. If I'm going to hold on to resentment, that I can't let it go, it's inebriating. That I'm going to be drinking this poison, thinking it's going to kill you. But instead of killing you, it kills myself. Okay. So blocking any kind of power will then cause us to overeat, overspend, gamble, drink, drug, etc. So our real problem underneath any addiction is resentment and selfishness and fear and dishonesty. So if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. This may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for sexaholics or alcoholics or compulsive gamblers, spenders, overeaters, etc., these things are poison. We turn back to our list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to actually kill. How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. So let's talk about this. Holding on to this puts me in a state of kind of a victim mentality, self-pity. And I mean this kindly to therapy, because I'm a therapist myself, a psychotherapist, counselor, but therapists might be fanning the flames of self-pity or resentment. Even politically speaking, there is now this thing of, if you suggest that maybe the victim has a part in something where they continue to get victimized, it's now called victim blaming. And I guess we don't want to do that. The problem is, I see it as if the person continues to put their feet under other people's feet and wondering, why are you stepping on me? Well, you have a part in it. And that's what this is, we're going to talk about, our part in things. But self-pity says, no, life's crappy. It's happened on you, and kind of like, wham. And we all have done this. I don't know about you, but I think all of us have done this. I could do a nice presentation like this and 20 minutes later be afflicted with self-pity because something didn't go my way. So then, should I even do a live stream? I think of that a lot. Should I even share anything? I'm running the risk of trying to be helpful to people, and I would rather err on the side of trying to do something useful and maybe be accused of hypocrisy, or not by people, but by God, versus do nothing because I don't think I'm perfect enough. So I think it's better to just talk in terms of what's going on in my life and how I try to practice um, these steps and the principles. And it seems to be useful to me because we're growing together. So we're going to learn what the actual steps out are going to be. Notice, how can we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol or any other addiction or codependency. Maybe you're in a love relationship where the person is using and you're just beside yourself. What are you going to do? Wishing is not useful. I smile and laugh because I think of Snow White, the animated Snow White, singing, I'm wishing for the one I love to come find me. It's like, wow, that is the setup. That is the setup. In fact, this sounds critical, but the birds even seem smarter than poor Snow White because the birds are trying to tell her to get away from the witch. It looks obvious to us all that she doesn't look like a friendly person. Would you take food from someone that looks like that? Well, there's my judgmentalism. Maybe I should, but it doesn't seem obvious, So anyway, we all have our problems, and maybe Snow White had some denial going on, just unawareness. Anyway, back to what we're talking about. This was our course. And when something in the AA book or a book, it's like it's telling me do this, I tend to put a little 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. So anybody that's ever hurt us or any resentment, this is how I go at it, is we realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Well, that makes sense. Whether it's the government, the world, the people, even a murder, someone, or bad parents. There's really hardly any bad parents. They're just parents that had poor skills, really. And I'm not trying to minimize. I mean, if you want to call your parents bad, but every parent's built to try to love their children. It's like so instinctual, the best way they know. It's just that they're really challenged. And I'm not saying they can't do great harm. It's just that, there's hardly anyone who's totally bad and hardly anybody that's really totally good. Anyway, so we have to have this realization, this spiritual realization that people around us are perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. Now, this is where I go, are you kidding? We're going to use words like symptoms, but it kind of works. Okay, so when people are cutting me off, I drive 3 miles from my home to my work. It's kind of dangerous. And I'm not exaggerating. I've been sideswiped. I've had all kinds of weird things in just 3 miles. People, I think, have been angry and more selfish after the pandemic. There is a marijuana shop across the street right next door to me. Maybe they're quickly going to get their fix. But anyway, I just have to say, I do not like their symptoms. If you see it like that, we start to have compassion and understand maybe the person has been through a very difficult hardship that I don't know why, and then they wanted to be a government leader. There has to be reasons for things. So, two, we ask God. So this sounds like a prayer. So to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Tolerance, let's be clear. Tolerance does not mean I like what you're doing. If I tolerate snoring, it doesn't mean I enjoy it. It means I'm tolerant because people are people. They snore. So tolerance doesn't mean you have to tolerate my behavior and exactly accept it. And if you don't, then you don't love me. That's just immaturity. Okay, that we can't be friends. even though we have really different ideas of things. So we ask God to help me to have some tolerance, patience, pity. Pity here means love. Okay, this is 1940s English. So in American English, and pitying someone meant to give them love. And we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. We're trying to help people who are sick. My daughter is pregnant. She's sick with COVID. Yeah, talk about a little bit concerned, praying for her. As I was texting her and talking with her, I did have the thought, the best way I could help her is by not actually talking with her now and letting her be. But there was a baby shower, which we were planning for this weekend, which got canceled. So a lot of times love is when you're doing something that the person even doesn't know you're doing it for them. But how does it benefit them? So let's talk about people that I might have a continuing resentment. The person continues to harm me. I don't want to be a victim. So I pray for tolerance, patience, and love or pity. And later, you know what? I'm going to read the rest of this. I think that's what I want to do. And then we'll talk in general. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick person, sick man. For how can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. 6, thy will be done. And I'll stop here. So I have to see that they're a sick person. I have to ask God, how can I be helpful to them? If a person's continuing to harm me, and I then decide what part do I have in this, I have to then see that maybe I'm not assertive. Maybe I'm not honest. So being helpful to them might actually be honest, sharing more information rather than being polite on the outside and then just holding resentment on the inside. Okay, so the AA program is really interesting. It's really clear about letting go of things that are beyond our control. But the things we could do, we need courage. So many, many years went by, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And I'm reading this with a client. And all of a sudden it jumped out at me. Another to do. I added the 7. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chances of being helpful. Oh, do you think so, huh? Being argumentative, critical is not helping them. So that's a lot of my to-do is just don't give unasked for advice, just to let it go. But if I needed to speak the truth in love, I may need to just say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to have to say this, but I was really hurt by what you said or what you did. I'd like to talk about this so I can stop being kind of hurt by it and we can move on. A lot of times in my life, I would avoid this because I don't want ugliness. I don't want to make anything worse. All the while, it's growing and festering more and more. I think there may be a time for those of us in the world to speak up a little bit more and just share what's going on instead of cowering and, oh, I don't want to make waves. I don't want to cause problems. I don't want to be labeled a bigot or intolerant or whatever. It's like, well, it may be making things worse if we don't share just honestly, just thoughts, ask questions about things, rather than just watching negativity and watching media personalities use the poorest communication skills in the world to try to get their point across, knowing full well they're not actually trying to help have a conversation. They're just trying to make that person look bad. And you think, oh, that's a stretch. No, it says it on the YouTube video. So and so shreds such and such over this issue. It's like, wow. I think for me, that's moving the wrong direction. That listening more, trying to have good conversation. If people want to not have the conversation, I suppose that's okay too, but to talk about facts, talk about information, ask questions like, do we want to even change our opinion of something? Like, is this conversation about me being open enough to be able to change it? Because if I'm not going to change anything, then why have the conversation? You know? So I'm open to questions, comments, anybody who wants to share about this. We're going to get back to attitude of gratitude, but one way to get rid of that is to really understand that the world around us is sick and we are sick. We're part of it. And so we all ask God for help in this. And we'll be much more able to be thankful, you know, and more, well, we're going to be more thankful and more gracious if we're not resentful. Like, why is it that resent means to refeel? Why not refeel all those good times over and over and over? Yeah. Yeah. I'm mindful of a powerful person, a Christian man, a pastor, a Lutheran pastor, I believe. He was in Romania during the time of the, well, I want to get my history correct. I think it was under communism. His name is Richard Wurmbrand, and his story is called Tortured for Christ. I think there's a video on this, which is very powerful to see. He was tortured like beyond belief. I won't get into gory details, but it's pretty gory. But why am I bringing him up? Because I have this deep belief that if people have suffered so much, live to tell about it, that they're probably wise and they probably met God somehow. And this man shares he has a smile. He seems joyful and happy. He and his wife both survived, so they're reunited. And I'll post the link of this video in the description. After watching this, I thought, after watching Tortured for Christ, I thought, I'm going to go see if he was alive and what he had to say. I'm going to jump backwards a little bit. So he had memorized 366 verses on fear, about fear not. God did not give us a spirit of fear. And evidently there are about 365, 366. And the day of his capture, he's bold enough to speak out against the communists. And a lot of Christians were kowtowing to the government, and they were putting this kind of socialistic, communistic bent on Christianity. And he just stands up and says, we're here to share Christ. We're here to live not in this world, but in the next world. And he gets captured. They put a black bag over his head and they're hauling him away. And he asks, what day is it? Because he had memorized a verse for every day of the year. And they think he has gone mad. Like, why are you asking this? Do you know where you're going? And it just happened to be leap year. Yep, he was on leap year, taken away February 29th. And in discovering this, he smiled. He said, okay, he knew God was with him because he knew the verse for that day. So he gets through this prison camp experience, Richard Wurmbrand, for those who are just joining us. And at the end, he gets through it. He's being interviewed and he says, look, it was really, really hard to be in there, and it was hard some days, worse than others. But he said it occurred to him when it said, rejoice in the Lord, or be joyful, that it was not a feeling, that it was not a feeling that he'd be waiting for and wishing for. It was kind of a command to be in that state of being joyful, to that it could be done. And I think maybe we're perhaps tricked into thinking we can't, we're at the whim of our own feelings. But he suggests that no, we through practice, he doesn't use these words, but we through practice can learn to be joyful in all circumstances. That's what St. Paul says, learning to be content with everything. So let's see what has been shared. Yeah, it says, Eric, I struggle with gratitude. When I try to be thankful for things, I don't feel gratitude and I feel block. What can I do to open up? It's a good question. So let's look at this. Struggle with gratitude. I think we all do. There are a few people in my life, I don't know how they do it. They're just very thankful people. They seem to have been born that way. But for most of us, I think it's something we have to learn to do. When I try to be thankful for things, I don't feel gratitude. Yeah, there's something, I think we want, at least I don't want to be pretending and putting a shell around who I am to pretend to be thankful in a way that could cause actually mind-body symptoms where I'm incongruent and I feel blocked. What can I do to open up? I think the answer is actually there. Open up to what? I think we open up to God. We open up to, maybe we're crying in the midst of this, saying, God, help me in this situation. It's so dark. It's so terrifying. It's so scary. I'm so mad. I'm so hurt. It's so bordering on despair. I think that's where God wants us to be, in that we're that on the edge, that's when we can't rely on anything in ourselves, that we rely on him. St. Cuthbert, a British saint, ancient, would pray with water just up to his neck. He was sneaking out at night to pray. No one knew this. He was coming back wet. People were polite, saying, why are you? But finally they said, why are you wet? I don't think he told them, but someone then followed him out, and it looks like he was praying in, and you have to be on Scotland, and I've been there actually. That was something I'm thankful for. And the water, so it's not like these smooth beaches that you can go out. No, he'd pray on these rocks and water coming up to his neck. And he says, well, when asked, why do you do this? He says, I don't feel like I'm really praying unless I'm on the verge of death. And I think we may have actually experienced that when we are at the end of ourselves. We are so scared. We're praying with attention. Our minds aren't wandering about that latte I'm going to drink later, or can I get this prayer done so I can go to my work or whatever. I think we pray with attention and focus. So that's why suffering can be a good thing. If we have the wherewithal to pray and say, God, please give me eyesight to see what's good here. Help me to see what your plan is. And my experience is he doesn't go, well, here's the whole plan. I'll show it all to you. Oh, well, then it now all makes sense. No, I might just get a snippet of something, just a snippet that there's something good in that. And it's a skill. It's a skill. I think it's a skill we develop, but God is the one who gives us the clarity and the insight. I think, to be able to see it and to see what's good. I'm going to go to another section of the AA book. And I think the best way to do that is to not show the screen. Hold on here. The reason is the first part of the book is right there and accessible, but the last half are stories. And so this is called Acceptance Was the Answer. And it's page 407. It's a really good story. But he's talking about his recovery. And it's what I call the acceptance speech. There's a lot of acceptance taught me this, acceptance taught me that, and so on. Yeah, this is interesting. It's always weird to jump into the middle of a story, but it says, it helped me a great deal to become convinced that alcoholism or addiction or codependency was a disease, not a moral issue. That I had been drinking or fixing people as a result of a compulsion, or even worry we could add in there, or resentment as a result of a compulsion, even though I had not been aware of the compulsion at the time. And that sobriety was not a matter of willpower. So overcoming negativity or depression or anxiety is not a matter of willpower. I really believe in that. We have some choice in it, but it's just not all us. Because if it was all us, then why wouldn't we have fixed this 10 years ago? You know, what's wrong with us? I had a person earlier say, well, I was just stupid. I said, no, dear one. You're not a stupid person. This is a compulsion. Let's be clear on this, that we may have been afflicted with a disease called sin, that it affects us. Because how much smarter do we need to get? All one has to do is look out one's window or look on YouTube and to say, if we're so smart, why do we have such severe problems? It's because there's spiritual sickness out there. So it says, not a matter of willpower. The people of AA had something that looked much better than I had, but I was afraid to let go of what I had in order to try something new. There was a certain sense of security in the familiar. How many of us have stuck in our dysfunction because we're just too afraid of something new? And there is a certain familiarity in our sicknesses and our passions. It says, an acceptance proved to be the key to my drinking problem, or we'll say any problem. When I stopped living in the problem and began living in the answer, the problem went away. So if we're trying to fight resentahol or resentment, if I try to fight it directly by trying not to be resentful, or if I'm fearful, I'm trying not to be fearful, or I'm trying not to be negative, or I'll try to stop overeating, or I'll try to stop lusting, or I'll try to stop. That's not going to work. It says, when I started living in the answer, the problem went away. And I think a lot of people mistakenly think that people in 12 steps are sitting around holding hands, trying to help each other not use another day. Yeah, that's not a lot of fun because it doesn't work. It says, an acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. Wow, that's kind of a bold statement. When I am disturbed, it's because I find some person, place, when I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. So I love the phrase, when I am disturbed, and I can be disturbed, it's always going to boil down to some person, place, thing, or situation's unacceptable to me, as if I'm the one to accept or not accept something. Yeah, when I accept that this is what's been given to me, life has its challenges. This is part of life. This is, whether you have an addiction, whether you have depression, whether you have loved ones, people that are, and for instance, the people that are calling and I feel so sick to my stomach that I can't help them because they're on a waiting list. And then I can be mad at the government and they did this and all that. Yeah, no, accept that this is how it's supposed to be at this moment. That nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. And I think this is hard for us to swallow at first. I honestly, because the things I've heard this last week, cancers and stress induced illnesses from that, abuse, legal problems, panic attacks, people with psychosis. I mean, it's just so sad. But if I take comfort somehow that maybe this is supposed to be this way, and it doesn't mean I can't pray more or try to find solutions to get other therapists connected with people. But if I can't even begin to accept it, like I'm like pissed off, mad, what's wrong? That's not helpful. Okay. So there's a certain surrender that takes place. And so it really boils down to having some kind of faith in God, that I'm going to trust that God is in control of all this, that he allows pain and suffering for our good, even though we're oriented to, oh, nothing painful and suffering can be good. Well, that's how addicts think. Addicts think, get quick. I can't tolerate the pain and suffering. Give me something to feel better now. There's a candle, by the way. Candle addictions are another story, but yeah, that's the thing, is when we let go and say, okay, God, whatever you want to have happen. He says, until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. This is page 417. Unless I could accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. If everybody focused that way, our world would be much, much better. But instead, we all, I'm saying metaphorically, we all point the finger at the other, saying, you're the ones who are wrong. No, you're the one that's wrong. And then obviously no one ever gets better. It all starts with if we just took responsibility for our own life, our own actions. And the reality is that while I may be wasting my life looking at everybody else doing stuff, my life's ticking away and I only have so much time. And if I'm aware of my death, aware of my mortality, which is sober living, being in touch with the reality, then I'm just going to work on what I can work on today. And I'm going to be happier in the long run because I see that these things are for my benefit. It says Shakespeare. So to reiterate, I need to not concentrate on what needs to be changed in the world, but when changed in me and my attitudes. Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. He forgot to mention that I was the chief critic. I was always able to see the flaw in every person, every situation, and I was always glad to point it out because I knew you wanted perfection, just as I did. AA and acceptance has taught me that there's a bit of good in the worst of us and a bit of bad in the best of us, that we are all children of God and we all have a right to be here. When I complain about me or about you, I'm complaining about God's handiwork. I am saying that I know better than God. So this happens a lot. This is another form of arrogance we humans struggle with, that we just know better than God. And it takes the form of, I'm going to change my gender. I'm not trying to say that there aren't circumstances, but I'm pointing out that we just know better than God. We're going to solve the pandemic this way. We're going to do it that way. When we get so bold as to be so firm in our convictions, our opinions, that's not humility, you know. For years, I'm sure this book, by the way, has a great phrase that says, we realize we know only a little, and God will disclose to us little by little. For years, I was sure that the worst thing could be happen to a nice guy like me would that it be turn out to be an alcoholic. Today, I find it's the best thing that has ever happened to me. This proves I don't know what's good for me. And if I don't know what's good for me, then I don't know what's good or bad for you or for anyone else. So I'm better off if I don't give advice. Don't figure I know what's best, and just accept life on life's terms as it is today, especially my own life, as it actually is. So this is important. It doesn't mean we can't have a conviction where God's moving us to do something to help better the world. It's not a lay back and do nothing attitude, but it's like accepting it, that we'll be more accepting of people's problems. It says, before AA, I judged myself by my intentions while the world was judging me by my actions. Yeah, that turns things around. I might have good intentions, but if my actions aren't really helpful, and I'm using the word helpful because helpful is loving, but loving is getting so twisted and redefined, as many words are these days, that people say, well, that's not loving and you're a bad person. It's like, you know, each of us is going to have to decide and pray to the God of our understanding to figure out what is helpful or not and what is loving. This is important, I guess. So we're going to go longer here. Acceptance says, and we're on page 418 of the AA book. This does exist on the AA website. You can Google AA Big Book PDF, and I'll do another. I'll do a video of this so that you can see what I'm reading. But the middle of the page says, acceptance has been the answer to my marital problems. It's as though AA has given me a new pair of glasses. Max, his wife, and I have been married now for 35 years. Prior to our marriage, when she was a shy, scrawny adolescent, I was able to see things in her that others couldn't necessarily see. Things like beauty, charm, gaiety, a gift for being easy to talk to, a sense of humor, and many other fine qualities. It was as if I had, rather than the Midas touch, which turned everything to gold, a magnifying mind that magnified whatever it focused on. Over the years, as I thought about Max, her good qualities grew and grew, and so we married, and all these qualities became more and more apparent to me, and we were happier and happier. But then, as I drank more and more, the alcohol, or the lust, or the spending, or the gambling, or the overeating, or the media watching, anything that's really addictive, seemed to affect my vision. Instead of continuing to see what was good about my wife, I began to see her defects. And the more I focused my mind on her defects, the more they grew and multiplied. Every defect I pointed out to her became greater and greater. Every time I told her she was a nothing, she receded a little bit more into nowhere. The more I drank, the more she wilted. Then one day in AA, I was told I had the lenses in my glasses backwards. The courage to change and the serenity prayer meant that I should not change my marriage, but rather I should change myself and learn to accept my spouse as she was. AA has given me a new pair of glasses, and I can again focus on my wife's good qualities and watch them grow and grow and grow. So you got that? Very powerful section. It's very similar to what these saints are saying, that if you focus on something, it's going to grow. They use those words. that we fixate on something. So if I'm fixating on my wife's negative qualities, I'm actually helping them get worse. Okay. This is in a lot of the 12-step literature, and it's not about magical thinking, but it's the opposite of, well, it's faith in a negative sense. I'm trusting that things are going to get worse by focusing on how bad things are versus focusing on my wife's good qualities. Same thing with yourself. If a person's just thinking about all the bad stuff in themselves, can't see any good, that's not helpful either. And for those that need to know about King Midas was an old Greek tale where King Midas was so greedy that he really wanted more and more gold. And I think somehow he got this gift of being able to touch things and they turn to gold, like the microphone here. I touch it, it becomes gold. He accidentally touches his daughter and then she became gold. And so that's a bad thing. So lenses backwards. It seems like every day I have to turn the lenses backwards to focus on, so how can I solve this? What is my character defect that's making me upset? Not them. So perhaps with the media, it's accepting that they may not know better. Even if they do, they're trying to make money off of us. And pray for them to let it go, to not be critical of them. If I'm just critical of them, I mean, I'm being critical of them during this podcast, but I could really go to town and point out negative things. If that was my calling, I don't think it is. That would not be helpful to them. That would be shaming them, and they probably wouldn't see it. Praying for them, praying for God to work in their life would be the best possible thing. So this is where it gets interesting. I can do the same thing with an AA meeting. This is the kind of the middle of page 419. The more I focus my mind on its defects, late start, sometimes they start late, long drunkalogs, cigarette smoke, the worse the meeting becomes. But when I can see what I can add to the meeting rather than what I can get out of it, and when I focus my mind on what's good about it rather than what's wrong with it, the meeting gets better and better. When I focus on what's good today, I have a good day. And when I focus on what's bad, I have a bad day. If I focus on the problem increases. If I focus on the answer increases. Very important section here. So for years with clients, with people I'm sponsoring or coaching, here's what I say: replace the word meeting with marriage. When I focus my mind on the marriage defects, whatever they are, the worse the marriage becomes. When I can see what I can add to the marriage rather than what I can get out of it. And when I focus my mind on what's good about it rather than what's wrong with it, the marriage or meeting gets better and better. And as I was reading this earlier, I had this thought: why not put America or the country of your choice? Why not put the government? When I see what's wrong with the government or with America, America gets worse. If I can see what I can add to America rather than what I can get out of it, America will get better and better. Okay, follow me there. When I focus on what's good today, I have a good day. When I focus on what's bad, I have a bad day. If I focus on the problem increases. If I focus on the answer increases. Really good section. I'll do a whole video just on this, but I know we're going a little bit long here, but I'll just finish with this because there's one other point that's really important. It says, perhaps the best of all, this is page 420 of the AA Big Book. Perhaps the best thing of all for me is to remember that my serenity or peace is inversely proportional to my expectations. The higher my expectations of Max and people are, the lower is my serenity. I can watch my serenity level rise when I discard my expectations. But then my rights try to move in, and they too can force my serenity level down, He puts rights in quotes. So if I start to have expectations, my serenity will go down. When I discard my expectations, well, I didn't think I would see this in America. I didn't think I would see this in my family. But you know what? I'm just going to humbly say, God, whatever your will is, you've gifted me whatever you want. There must be some benefit in this for me, that all things must work together for the good. If I start to think in terms of rights, and I will call out some therapists, therapists are well-intended people, but sometimes we have to just step outside and ask ourselves, am I helping my client by having them focus too much on themselves and what their rights are, and have high expectations in marriages or relationships? I think it's good to know what healthy is. And I do this a lot of times. A lot of times I'm saying the bar is up here. This is where the family should be. But they're involved in violence and calling the police. And it's just horrible. I think it's okay to have this, but to go in and expect this, I think a lot of us struggle with perfectionism. We expect things to be perfect, and then we're very disappointed with ourselves, with the world. So I let go of my rights, and and this is a magical question. Another big thing is, and I'm going to put this. The question is, how important is this really? How important is this really? If it's really, really important, then it's worth fighting for. But a lot of times it's not that important. It's not that important. It's just I get this fake sense of importance. I was ordering new phones, which I really didn't want to do, and I'm making it sound like the person at the phone company store tried to talk me into them. She didn't. She was very polite, but I went in because I couldn't get my phone to call a 1-800 number. Forgot what it is, but you don't put a 1 or you put a 1, or it was something so simple. But then I thought, well, maybe we should upgrade my phone, or my wife's phone rather, because she's using a Samsung 5, which is so old. She called my phone old. She said it was an iPhone 8, and I was a little bit offended, like, no. And I told her this. I will confess. I said, look, I don't buy into this plot to have me so dissatisfied with an article that I have to buy one every 6 months to a year for $1,000, and to keep upgrading this, so that then where are these old phones going to go? Put them in landfill, or, so I was being kind of tongue in cheek. She goes, no, I get it. It's like, yeah, no, this phone works and my wife's phone works kind of, except it won't accept, I'm gonna 1G, whatever. So anyway, I walked away with an iPhone 12 and an iPhone 11. They said it'll be here in 2 to 3 days. Okay. So I called 2 to 3 days. No phone. And on and on and on. This was May like 24th. Yeah. Still, we don't have any phone. It scares me to go, do I really need a new phone? I think I will give my old phone to my wife, and then I'll get a new phone. Or we'll both get new phones. But we'll pray about it. I may buy it somewhere else. So here's the thing. Once I learned, oh, this is probably the shipping problem. And in the light of all things, we're not talking baby formula here. This is just a phone. We're not talking getting weapons or food to people in another country. It's not important. It's not important at all. And I think if we start from there, that how important is this really? It would get rid of a lot of our arguments. Some things are really important. If I'm holding on to resentment and I can't let it go, and I need to have the courage to have a hard, difficult conversation with someone, it's important and it's not going to go away. then I need to step out of my comfort zone and work on that issue by God's grace. It says, I have to discard my rights as well as my expectations by asking myself, how important is it really? How important is it compared to my serenity, my emotional sobriety? And when I place more value on my serenity or sobriety than on anything else, I can maintain them at a higher level, or at least for a time being. So how do we get rid of our rights? It's by asking that question, and I think that's what helps us to start to be have a better attitude. Yeah, John asks, and I think it's fair since I asked for questions. Do you have any answer to this? What wisdom do you have about our attitude with Russia, Ukraine, and U.S.? I'll leave that there. Nice square icon thing. I don't know if it's properly called an avatar, but I've heard some really good things on this, and I will post them in the description box. It's actually from a monastery in Russia, but it doesn't really they're not coming at this from, I think war is awful. It's always awful. As we read tonight, the victor in war only seems to win. It's made me wonder, I don't want to go down media trails to decide, is Ukraine right and Russia wrong? I mean, I could say that. I have other people in my life that say, slow down, be quick. Don't be quick to say that Russia is bad, all bad here. I will say from what I initially see, I just can't necessarily say that I've seen is a good thing. Kids getting killed, people being starving, all that stuff. But in light of also what's going on in Ethiopia, which doesn't get a lot of media attention, things are really bad there too, in civil wars. And I had a friend, we were talking about it, and say, well, there's war crimes. He says all war has war crimes. It's like, yeah, that's kind of true. As if we have a war that doesn't have a crime associated with it when things get really bad. It's made me pray. I pray for the people for sure. But I also try to look at the war within myself and not use this to avoid my own inner war, because this sounds selfish, but when all is said and done, if I am on my death, if I know I have 1 month to live, would I be, unless God told me, Eric, do something good for Ukraine or to help stop the war, but most likely I'd be focusing on my own life, trying to repent and to change the character defects that I have, and repentance. I think it's good to help people on both sides. That I believe in. Saints have actually ministered to both sides with the wounded. Hackshaw Ridge. I think that gentleman was taking care of both sides. There's a really good movie. Yeah. Leaving on a more positive note, just catching up. There is the series I watched on Hallmark Channel, which seems like totally different. But I would recommend it. The Hallmark Channel usually has movies and stuff that kind of irk me. Why? Because I think it's unrealistic. They seem to be centered about what women want, and men should be their prince in shining armor, etc. But I stand wrong that everything's not bad. But is a series called Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. I find it very interesting. Signed, sealed, and delivered. What it's about, and it starts with, well, first of all, Martha Williamson, who did Touched by an Angel and Promised Land, was the producer of this. And you wouldn't know it. You would, but you wouldn't, because it's so evolved to up to date. It doesn't have the same genre or the same feeling. So my hat is off to her. She's an incredible person to be able to give us what we need. The story is about a group of post office workers that work in the dead letter office that help these letters get back to the recipients or the sender. And sometimes they're years old, sometimes weeks old. And one major character, Oliver O'Toole, is a Christian, believes in God's providence, and believes that the letter comes to him rather than he looks for it. The storylines are so different that it's not always about a love story. It could be something in Afghanistan or, very creative. You don't feel like it's the same cookie cutter at all. Then probably the other thing that's wonderful about is character development. There are 4 major characters, and you just kind of, your heart goes out to them. They take their time developing the character, and now it feels like these people really exist, like they're really real. I know they're not, but I know that there's a fan club. And from a therapist point of view, from a point of view of people that have had hard childhoods, that you see the difficulties in childhood affecting them today and how they overcome that. That's what this is about. And you could easily just look at the outside of the characters and wonder about things. But then when you know the story behind it, your heart is just so open. Like you go, oh my gosh, I just now understand why they do what they do. Very similar to the topic we were talking about tonight, that people, and I'm going to run and get something here. If you see me blocked, that's usually what it's about. Something occurs to me, but you start to have that compassion and understanding for everybody is doing the best they know to do, and there's some story behind it. So we so enjoy this series. So what happened is there was a series. So if you go to Amazon Prime, you'll see the series was like maybe 45 or 1 hour episodes. I think maybe there's 10 or something like that. That sets the stage. But then they started doing movies, maybe 2 to 3 movies a year. And I will put actually in the description the movie order. You want to see them in order. I will say there is a lot of love story in there, which isn't a bad thing, because people are afraid to open up and be vulnerable. That's what this is really about. And the friendships are heartwarming. Like if you need something to help you feel good and that it's real and we can really have this in real life, it would be signed, sealed, and delivered. I don't see a downside to it. We joined for $4.95 or something like that, Hallmark Now, Movies Now, to be able to get the movies. We could have purchased them. I would have purchased them, and I might just buy the series just in case. But I just really like them, and I hope that continues on. So, speaking of which, I should probably set you all free. But let's, before I go, Stan shares, just talk to a friend in Mexico. let's see, I'm going to read this first. He has neighborhoods getting shot in the drug cartel crossfire. He has neighbors getting shot in the drug cartel crossfire. Violence is always sad, very difficult for the population. It is. We don't have that here. I think what's interesting is people's ability to adapt. I worked with people that grew up with very, very difficult situations. Just very difficult. But I'm always kind of shocked how people adapt and to try to find something good in the situation. So, well, it's good that I thought no one could be here because I didn't give anybody warning except maybe an hour. But it turns out it was quite fun for me. Thank you so much for letting me share. I wish you all well. If you like, go ahead and like and subscribe. We do have other channels. I have something more on the spiritual nature, Orthodox counselor, so you can look for that. This is much more the mental health side of things. And then for those that struggle with sexual addiction, I do have sexual recovery. So I have that as well. But what this channel focuses on is general mental health, a lot on addiction, a lot on how to deal with the world at large, and hopefully us growing one day at a time. You take care, everybody. We'll see you later. Have a good one.